Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from Pro Football Network. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, this was a pretty bad spanking by the hands of the Cowboys. Do you feel like this was a worse game than the Josh Allen jumps over Anthony Barr game, or do you feel like this was at least on par?
In terms of kind of my gut feeling on what I think about the Vikings, what this demonstrates to me, what changes, no, the Bills game was worse, right? I mean, the Vikings were 18-point favorites and they got boat raced, right? Now, the Cowboys beat the Vikings by more and more consistently, but there was always the thought, I was going to say at the back of my mind, but very clearly at the front of my mind, that the Vikings are not as good as the record is, right? And this is kind of like proof of that. So part of it, of course, is me always celebrating the fact that I'm right, that my takes are correct. I cheer for my takes. So that kind of helps soften the blow a little bit. So maybe that's not fair when compared to other people, but I just feel like the Cowboys game sucked, but I don't think it was the shock that the Buffalo game was, right? Because the Vikings had just come from a season, right? What was Buffalo, like week 5, week 6, week 4? They just come from a season, right, where they made it to the NFC Championship game, and then they upgraded at quarterback really significantly. And so a very reasonable belief that this was one of the best teams in the NFL going up against the worst team in the NFL. At least that's what we thought going in to the game. And we did the whole thing where we looked over the roster and we're like, hey, there's like 3 starting players on offense that would start for most NFL teams, etc. Right? Dallas, I was concerned about. I was like, hey, Dallas is a top 3 defense. Dak Prescott's a really good quarterback. He can produce top 5 offenses in the right circumstances. You know, this is a team. This is like a great team that could do a lot. I don't care that the Vikings just beat the Bills, right? I said after the Vikings beat the Bills, I was like, hey, man, this doesn't demonstrate that the Vikings are, like, this improves my opinion of the Vikings, of course, but this doesn't demonstrate that all those concerns went away. And then all those concerns show up. This isn't proof, right? This isn't like, just like one game is not proof that a team is fluky bad. One game is not proof that a team is fluky good, right? This isn't proof one way or the other, but it is a demonstration of the overall concept, even if the result is way worse than you would have expected had you, come into the game with a thought, hey, the Vikings are about an average team. Like, okay, you think the Vikings are an average team? They would not lose 40-3 to the Cowboys.
Just one of those games where everything went wrong all at once, and you just kind of had to sit and wait. Or just become disassociated with it. That's what I did. And I feel like most people should have. But we'll get into that in just a moment. I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. We're going to get a couple things out of the way with Patreon and all that, and a special thank you. New Patreon person this week is Anna Lynch. Thank you so much for signing up. You can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode and get access to things like bonus material, Discord, all of that over at patreon.com/NorseCode. You can go over to paypal.me/NorseCode as well as a one-time donation. Or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some of the amazing shirts that we saw at the live show this last week. Some of it ran the gamut between the sweatshirts, the regular t-shirts, and all of that. I didn't see a shower curtain, but I was told that a shower curtain is being purchased.
Yeah, for someone's move, I think. So it doesn't shock me that it wasn't purchased immediately after the show. It sounds like that's going to be kind of a short to medium term thing rather than an immediate thing.
Exactly. So check us out over at norsecode.threadless.com. And a special word about the live show this last Thursday. That was so much fun, and people have been talking about it for the last few days, about how much fun it sounded like we were having. We packed the bar, which, not an exaggeration, that was a Vikings bar through and through from about 7:35 onwards. A couple minutes after we started, when everyone else decided to leave, the Norse Code fans came in, and boy was that some fun. That was... we did the giveaways. We gave away the tickets. We gave the forever home for the Treadwell jersey. That we took, people took pictures with it. It was wonderful. What a fantastic what a fantastic evening Thursday was.
Yeah, I this was the most fun I had recording a podcast in a long time. And I mean, like, I have a lot of fun recording Norse code. I think that's pretty clear. This is like not a very good moneymaker for James and I for the amount of time that we put in and the investments that we've made. So it kind of has to be a passion project. And you know, the amount that everyone provides via Patreon is really fantastic. It really kind of helps it out. We couldn't do it without that Patreon stuff. And so I'm not saying like, you know, that you know, we don't get rewarded for our efforts, but just in terms of the amount of time it takes and the amount that we get out of it, it really is not like a profitable venture. And so it has to be something that we enjoy. So I enjoy recording probably about 95% of Norse Code episodes. I will not tell you what the other 5% are. But
Seattle episodes, obviously, but we'll get on that.
Yeah. But the live show, I mean, all the live shows are fantastic. I had a ton of fun in London, had a ton of fun, you know, even in New York with the passive aggressive DJ, had a ton of fun in Seattle. But I mean, this was really fun. It was a high point, I think, for my experience of the show, which, you know, after recording for, are we at 11 years now? Is that what's happening?
We're in the middle of the 10th year. So we'll be doing 10 years in next August.
All right. So after 10 years of the show, to have a high point come at this, I don't know. It's really great. It was really fun meeting everybody who came out to see us and wanted to talk to us about the show or talk to us about random bits or just wanted to have like a conversation. That was so cool. And it is like something that's like really weird about being a podcaster. You know, I share so much about kind of my thoughts or what my life is or what's going on in James' life. We talk about James's like, you know, kids and his romantic ventures. Like it feels like a lot of people are learning a lot about us and they feel like, you know, hey, you know, these are our friends. I don't know anything about any of you. So it was really cool coming out to see you and learning about a lot of you and what your lives are like and stuff like that. So that was really cool. I don't know. I had an enormous amount of fun. This was great.
Yeah. My highlights included Arif signing the demonology book. The demonology book was right up there. That was right before the show started. Signing the sweatshirt during the show, and the reaction that we got from both the signed Blair Walsh picture and the reaction from the bingo shirt that Dawn got for me. So I've joked that it was. Yeah. I joked with I joked it's one thing to like sit and have the inside jokes or whatever for on the show and between you and I and we talk about it there. It's another thing to have a bar full of people get them and just laugh and encourage it. So it was so much fun meeting you guys. Yeah. It was so much fun to talk and all of that. So thank you guys to everybody who showed up, and for those who didn't, you got to check us out next time. I think this is going to end up being a yearly thing over at Union 32. We're going to try.
Oh, anyway. They were so
Union
phenomenal.
32 is so awesome. The guy was great about getting us in there, about anything that we needed, was getting a hold of me before. Like, dude's awesome.
Extremely professional and well done.
Yeah.
And a lot of fun.
Yep. Union 32 Craft House, Eagan, Minnesota. Thank you so much. We definitely want to return. And the bar staff was even like super happy about like how well you guys treated them. So thank you guys so much for coming out. Let's get into the review of the game. This was ugly. And you can point fingers a lot of different directions. And that's what we're going to do. We haven't done this year. We haven't done this year. We have a reason to break it out. It's the Thanksgiving episode. It is time for Arif to debate the only person on the planet that is on his level. Welcome to another episode of Arif Debates Arif. Arif, I have 3 people that I am going to blame for the loss to the Cowboys. I need you to tell me why it is their fault. The
Absolutely.
first person I am going to blame is Kevin O'Connell. How was this game Kevin O'Connell's fault?
I mean, it's so obviously Kevin O'Connell's fault. First, he's the head coach. He takes responsibility for anything that happens on either side of the ball. And it is his responsibility to make sure that there is not just a game plan in place, but ways to create adjustments as the game plan evolves throughout the course of the match. I think that if you take a look at obviously what happened on the offensive side of the ball, that's clearly, I mean, they only scored 3 points against the Cowboys. 3 points. How can you ever win a game scoring 3 points? The Jets nearly tied a game scoring 3 points. It wasn't enough, right? Like, there is no way you can expect to win a game with, especially against a team heading in 6-3, right? Because this is not a bad team, and they were 6-3 with their backup quarterback. You need to match them throw for throw, right? And so a lot of that has to do with Kevin O'Connell. You take a look at somebody like TJ Hawkins and he had his drops. Hey, he's new. The head coach needs to know that you can't put your entire game plan around your third receiving option that you just traded for. That's entirely on the person who designs the game plan. That's Kevin O'Connell. And you take a look at, the time of possession, right? It obviously favored the Cowboys pretty seriously, but the biggest issue here is that the offense couldn't sustain drives. They couldn't generate first downs. And, when you see all this pressure coming, obviously it's not Kevin O'Connell's fault that Christian Darrisaw got hurt. It's not Kevin O'Connell's fault that Ed Ingram can't hold up, when they're twisting an edge rusher inside. But what you can do is you can move the pocket. The Vikings have been doing that for ages with Kirk Cousins. It's something that he knows how to do. They can, run screen plays that actually work instead of the tight end screens that never work. There's a category of screens that have been effective for the Vikings. They never use them. And this offensive genius, the one that designed the Los Angeles Rams Super Bowl winning offense, it was Sean McVay, right? That guy can't figure out how to make Justin Jefferson go. Justin Jefferson had 33 yards. Right, that's incredible. Of course, it is Kevin O'Connell's fault. The whole Vikings game plan always relies on them scoring on that first drive, right? Getting that scripted drive in, and then after that scripted drive, they get a touchdown. They maintain a lead for however long. They see what the opponent does. They get hit a little bit, and then in the fourth quarter, their adjustments kick into high gear. They score a bunch of points in the fourth quarter. They didn't score those first points. Obviously, again, Kevin O'Connell's not the one who fumbled the ball, but you're still in the scripted stage in that second bit, and all you get away with is that field goal. You can't figure it out in the red zone. Absolutely a disgrace. It's Kevin O'Connell's fault. He's the head coach. It's on him. I've talked before. I don't think that Kirk Cousins played poorly, right? It's entirely about the adjustments in the game plan. The Vikings didn't realize, hey, Trevon Diggs is going to be on Justin Jefferson. Should we do something about that? Yes, and they didn't.
Arif, why was this Ed Donatell's fault?
It is such a cop-out to say that the head coach is responsible for everything that happens in a game. NFL teams are staffed with like 40 people, right? It's not just entirely on the head coach. Maybe it's a good PR move for the head coach to take it upon himself, but everybody has to take accountability. And the side that gives up 40 points is not responsible. I mean, part of the reason that the Vikings were only able to score 3 points, yeah, the fumble plays a role, but part of the reason they had awful field position. When did the Vikings ever have the ball beyond their own 25 to begin a drive? The answer is never. They never started a drive with the ball beyond their own 25-yard line. Why? No turnovers, no forced punts, right? The first 7 drives from the Cowboys were scoring drives. Field goal, touchdown, field goal, touchdown, field goal, touchdown, touchdown. Like, there is no way that you can say that is the offense's fault. It's not like all of these were on short fields. Only one of them was on a short field. That was that first one. That was the fumble, right? But you take a look at how many yards these drives were. 75-yard drive, 53-yard drive, 59-yard drive, 44-yard drive, 75-yard drive, 41-yard drive, 54-yard drive on the field goal one coming in the fourth quarter. How many drives over 50 yards? That 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drives over 50 yards that end up in a score? 3 of them touchdowns? That is absolutely buck wild. There is no way that you can say that that's on the offense. Of course, it's on Ed Donatell. And the thing is, Kevin O'Connell, of course, he's the head coach. Of course, you want him to take responsibility. But he hires a guy like Ed Donatell. He leans on somebody like Ed Donatell, who has years and years and years of experience. He's relying on that system to be able to do things against these kinds of offenses that are supposed to be able to be, threats that rush on the outside. Guess who's bouncing outside? Tony Pollard. These offenses that pass downfield, right? From Dak Prescott to CeeDee Lamb, or again, Tony Pollard. You don't see what happens when they get a running back flipped outside. You know who did that against the Vikings? Sean McVay. Ed Donatel wasn't prepared for what Sean McVay already did to the Vikings. Come on, that is ridiculous. I mean, and on top of that, right, the matchups that the Vikings put, like Jordan Hicks on that deep route, to like you're telling me that you think Jordan Hicks is the best guy to cover Tony Pollard on a wheel route? That is nuts. The Vikings know that their weakness is the run defense. It's designed around being weak against the run to be strong against the pass, right? And I understand, hey, you don't have Cameron Dancer for the game, and Caleb Evans, for whatever reason, not available, right? So you have to play Andrew Booth, your second round pick. Oh my God. You haven't prepared your second round pick to play in games? That sounds like a coaching issue to me. So I don't know, man. You allow 40 points. You don't give your offense the field position to score points. You don't get a single turnover. Man, that sounds like a defensive issue to me.
Finally, why was this my fault? Because I've gotten a lot of crap over the last week.
It is so typical to take a look at the results on the field and blame the people who have quote unquote control over the game. But what has this podcast been about over the past couple of weeks, much to my chagrin, James? It has been about how the mystical arts affect the Vikings. And we know they do. They have since time immemorial. Before there was even a Minnesota Vikings, we know that there has always been some sort of dark magic at play. Why do you go to 4 Super Bowls and lose them? Some of them with the best defense in the NFL. 1969, the best defense the NFL has ever seen. I will take them over the 2000 Ravens or the 2013 Seahawks or the 77 Falcons. Who cares, man? We know that some of the teams the Vikings have put together are the best we've ever seen. 1998 Vikings didn't even make it to the Super Bowl. You're telling me that something as logical as a game script or a scheme is what's controlling? The Vikings have had great game scripts. They have had phenomenal schemes. They've had some of the most talented passers and receivers and running backs in NFL history. NFL history. And they haven't been able to do anything with any of that. Why? It's not because of anything as simple and calculated as who's coaching or who's on the field. It has everything to do with curses. And we know that this relates to James because James has been at the center of a number of Vikings curses, one involving a jersey, a Laquan Treadwell jersey, that the Vikings were winning while in his possession. And then he decides to disperse the curse from within his household to do you know where the Union 32 Draft House is? It's right next to the Vikings facility.
It is.
Right? You can walk there.
Literally why we chose it for the first live show in Union.
And you bring the most cursed object that you could possibly find, with Roger Goodell staring right into the Vikings facility with a Laquan Treadwell signed jersey and a picture of him from training camp.
Yeah, there was and
absolutely.
And the signed Blair Walsh and the signed rookie card from Ryan Leaf.
You brought the signed Ryan Leaf rookie card from Ryan Leaf himself after he gave a lecture about how not to do drugs, then got arrested for doing drugs. And then you bring in the Blair Walsh Pro Bowl picture with a certificate of authenticity. Come on, James. We know that this has everything to do with the fact that you would not break out the optimism shotgun. You forced me to do that, which we've seen the cartoon. That's not my job. That's your job, right? That you have upset the natural order of things and you brought the curse to the Vikings facility.
Yeah, this one's on me. My bad. It sucks. This game was not very good. And I'm starting to think I may have had something to do with it. This was a game where the Vikings never really had a shot. It was right around, I believe it was the third play from scrimmage for the Vikings. Yeah, I believe it was third down when Kirk Cousins dropped back, was blindsided, fumbled, and then that was it. From that moment on, you knew that the Vikings were not going to be in it. This was, and what was funny to me was that Darisaw was still in the game at this particular moment, but he had all of a sudden just let that one go, and that really set the tone for the rest of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Yeah,
ugh.
it's yeah. Um, Darisaw was not having a good day before that concussion. I think PFF gave him like a 59 or something like that. Um, yeah, the first sack you probably wouldn't want to put that on Darisaw. I mean, Kirk Cousins was holding on to it for like 5 seconds, but he got bull rushed for a pressure. He did give up another sack that was more his fault, and just generally speaking, was not getting out there in the run game. And someone, after I said that Darisaw was playing poorly, this is before the concussion. Someone said that he just doesn't look right out there. I don't really want to say that after he cleared concussion protocol that like that had a role. That I think that's actually unlikely, but it is concerning, right? That he has the second concussion. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So soon after the first concussion, and it makes you wonder, but it's just so difficult to kind of figure that out. For now, it's just kind of easy to say, hey, he played pretty poorly, and then he got hurt. Like Brandel comes in, Brandel plays a lot worse, right? So that creates a ton of pressure. It seemed like it was just not going to be the Vikings' day, which is a very difficult thing to think after like 7 straight wins, right? Like it's really tough to think like, going out of the half, right? That like they don't stand a chance just because of what the Vikings have done all year. Like you have the genetic memory of being a Vikings fan, right? And seeing what the Vikings have done forever and knowing that they just find ways to disappoint you. But this season, the danger of the season, of course, was how seductive it was to keep on generating these fourth quarter leads. I believe Kirk Cousins still leads the league in fourth quarter comebacks right now, right? So like there was something, right, where you're like, I could see them turning it around, with like Blake Brandel at left guard or left tackle and Ed Ingram at right guard and all kinds of problems being caused by the Dallas Cowboys. I think what Alec Lewis tweeted out that only on four-man rushes, so without blitzing, the Cowboys had a pressure rate of something like 56%. So they're able to drop everybody back into coverage and still create all kinds of problems. Yeah, it just like wasn't going to be their day.
And Cousins didn't even get a chance to do anything. It almost seemed like the Vikings forgot that there were ways to use this like rush to their advantage, like screens and whatnot. But man, this was just ugly. Kirk Cousins never had a chance to play ball.
Yeah, and I thought, honestly, if you kind of take a look at the totality of it, I thought Cousins actually played reasonably well, right? Like I thought that, given all of the circumstances, the enormous amount of pressure that he was under, how open the receivers were within the timing of the offense. I know that you take a look at the all-22, you take a look at what the receivers are doing. The receivers are actually doing a pretty good job of getting open on time, but the timing of the offense wasn't there for Cousins to be able to get rid of the ball quickly enough for that to kind of matter, right? And so it's not like he played like an elite quarterback would in that situation. I don't want to say that like it was all there for him, but rather that even when you have all of that, right? Even when you have a quarterback that's playing probably about as well as you can hope, that there are situations where the offense can only score 3 points. So yeah, I mean, if I were to create a list of people who I'd blame, which is very nearly what I had done just a bit ago, I don't know that Kirk Cousins would be in my top 5 or even top 7. So yeah, I mean, Cousins was constantly under harassment. I think his final pressure rate was something like 53% before he left the game. He was kind of victimized a little bit by drops. He had some really good throws, particularly to Hawkinson. Not just the 1 or 2 in the end zone or near the end zone. Both of those were really good, but the throw to the sideline that Hawkinson couldn't reel in, phenomenal. Like he had some really good throws in there. Some of the better ones that we've seen from him this year, and that did not happen. So tough loss, especially because the guy that's under the most fire actually did all right.
So how did the Cowboys get this much pressure through? We had to know that this was coming.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is just like, hey, when you know a steamroller is coming, there's not like you can't put up a barricade in quick enough time to stop it, right? Like sometimes the thing that's coming is just overwhelmingly good, right? And it's tough to stop. But some of it is Darisaw just somehow being out of sorts. Some of it is obviously Blake Brandel just not being a talent match for someone like Micah Parsons or Dorrance Armstrong or Demarcus Lawrence or Sam Williams. I mean, all of those edge rushers are really good. And the Cowboys, knew that if they kind of twisted some people around, they were like, "Hey, we can get somebody matched up on Ed Ingram." They were going to do it. So that's like part of it. The thing is, when a team is really good at generating a pass rush just from those four, there's not like a lot of game planning that you can do. Like, there's a limit to how much game planning is going to help you. Like, okay, yeah, Micah Parsons is rushing off the edge. What are we going to do about that? I guess we'll try to stop him. Like, it is, you can't yeah, the Vikings probably should have moved pockets a little bit more. The Vikings should have been a little bit more committed to play action as they kind of have been lacking in that all year relative to the rest of the league. They probably should have thrown some screen passes that did not result in crowded fields, but even the screen passes that weren't tight end passes were not executed remarkably well. So I don't want to say that they should rely on that, but I think that primarily they, in these situations kind of going in, they need to kind of throw away their traditional game plan and go to a short game. O'Connell really loves these deep shots and waiting for receivers to get open. And this is just not a situation where he can let that happen. And my guess is the game plan going in didn't have that many short passes in it because it almost never does. Here they should have 3-step drops in it fairly consistently, instead of kind of the 5-step drops that kind of dominate what the Vikings generally do.
This was just, and Micah Parsons was playing absurdly well. And you can say that about just about every Cowboys player, but Micah Parsons came in and showed why he should be in the short list for Defensive Player of the Year.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Micah Parsons heading into this game was already, a top 3 defensive player in terms of, who you might vote for Defensive Player of the Year. Maybe top 1. I know a lot of people want to put him up there, and I think that they've got a pretty good argument for it. But in this game, I think that he really made his case for that. Because I mean, who else would you put up there? I mean, you probably put Aaron Donald, who the team is not playing as well, right, as Aaron Donald is, so it'd be kind of tough to put him there. You might put Nick Bosa there, maybe Chris Jones. I don't know. And if Myles Garrett had sack numbers that kind of matched what he was doing, maybe Myles Garrett. But that's kind of where you'd. And Micah Parsons, I think, was at the top of a lot of people's list heading into the game, and I think that he'll come out of this game at the top of people's lists. I mean, he has just been a really remarkable player. And it's interesting because all the players that are probably good fits for Defensive Player of the Year, you take a look at the top 10, I'm guessing 9 of them are linemen, right? Defensive interior edge defenders. And so it's kind of a tough group to break. You're not getting as many safeties or cornerbacks or linebackers up there. But even then, I think Micah Parsons is standing out. And what's great is he started the year as an off-ball linebacker, and they were just like, yeah, you're too good at rushing the passer, so you're just going to do that more and more and more till you get all the sacks, every sack. But yeah, I think that Parsons did a pretty good job making his case.
Yeah, this was he was just absolute nightmare fuel out there for the Vikings. It was ugly to watch. The Vikings got no chance to develop anything, and runs weren't going anywhere either.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And the thing is, you take a look at the end of game statistics for the runs. I think let me take a quick look at this. You take a look at the end of game statistics for the runs. It doesn't look too bad, right? 72 yards on 11 carries at 6.5 yards a carry. But it. Watching the game, it did not feel like the runs were going anywhere. Some of that had to do with how the game started, just in terms I think it started with a 3-yard run and then a 4-yard run and a 2-yard run. And so the way that the game was starting is that you weren't getting very many runs. Let's see, he had 8 yard, 4 yard, 2 yard, 5 yard. Yeah, it wasn't until late in the game that we saw runs do anything, and by then it was just like obviously way too late, right? Like you can't do anything with an 11 yard run and late in the third quarter when you're down like 4 scores. And so early on, the runs were pretty well bottled up. There was like one or two beyond 5 yards. And I think a lot of that just has to do again with that defensive line matchup. And the thing is, we had, we talked to, Cowboys people about how good the defense is. And they say stuff like, yeah, well, I mean, you can run at somebody like, not DeMarcus Lawrence, but somebody like Micah Parsons or George Armstrong, right? You can run at them. But yeah, I mean, it turns out, I guess not. Maybe you can't.
Last thing I want to say about the offense, because there's not much to talk about, as it turns out, it looked like Justin Jefferson was getting mugged, and getting mugged often.
Yeah, I mean, they called that pretty loosely, I would say. Yeah, it was kind of surprising, especially midway through the game after like some attention had already been drawn to it. It seemed like they were kind of letting them get away with a lot there, which, I mean, it was a pretty heavy penalty game, right? So it's not as if, there were like 13 penalties that eventually ended up getting accepted. So it's not as if, the ref crew itself was playing with a light touch. It's that they seemed either, the Cowboys knew exactly what they could get away with and what they couldn't, and they played that line really well, or the refs weren't doing a very good job at kind of covering what was happening with Jefferson. And you take a look at like some of the Justin Jefferson, Trayvon Diggs matchups, like when they do match up against each other, and Diggs is doing actually a pretty good job. So it's not as if he was like relying on pulling jerseys or anything like that. He was playing well. But it just feels like there were some missed opportunities that were a product of maybe overly physical play. Not saying that would have swung the game or anything like that, but I thought that was the case. And I think that the Vikings should have exploited their opportunities outside of that Diggs matchup, because I think they were there.
So the offense stunk on ice. The defense was somehow worse.
Absolutely.
And I'm still confident their backup running back is still out there running.
Yeah, tough to say that he's a backup.
Yeah, that. We talked about it at the live show, too, that there are people that were concerned that he was going to be the one who was just going to be starting from here on out. And how they were happy that we're going to have Zeke out there. Well, Zeke was used, but this was a week for Zeke to get healthy.
Yeah, Zeke got 15 carries and 1 target. Pollard got 15 carries and 6 targets. And then you take a look at the snap count. I think Pollard had 39 and Zeke had 21. So yeah, Zeke started, right? But Pollard saw the field a lot more often. And, the Cowboys, as people have become familiar with, got out to a pretty big lead, and they still kind of leaned on the quicker, faster guy instead of kind of the more powerful, maybe grind out the clock guy. Like you would, if this is a true committee, you'd actually probably give Zeke more carries in order to do a better job grinding out the clock, right? So it is kind of a little interesting how that split out. Obviously, the Vikings were essentially victimized by what Pollard could do. He finished the game, like 189 yards or something like that. Yeah, 109 yards receiving, 80 yards rushing, 189 yards on 21 touches. Absolutely embarrassing. I already mentioned the wheel route. He ended up with 2 touchdowns, both receiving touchdowns, and his running got the Cowboys to the goal line, at which point Ezekiel Elliott did a pretty good job of scoring untouched. He did a great job of seeing a big hole and running through it.
Just, ugh. All right. We said at the live show we weren't sure if they knew how to use Dak Prescott. Do we know that they know how to use him now?
Yeah, I think we got an inkling. Yeah. they Dak Prescott only had 25 attempts. They didn't need to use him that much. Cooper Rush had 5 attempts. But he ended up with 139 passer rating. Again, the 2 receiving touchdowns from Pollard, the 2 passing touchdowns that Prescott had. Yeah, he did all right. He moved around in the pocket really well. His pocket movement was really fantastic, which is kind of one of the worries of him getting healthy, because it's not like he's not like a dual threat in the same way that like Daniel Jones or Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson are, but rather he does have a lot of movement capability and he uses it to do a pretty good job extending plays, and he did all of that when the Vikings were able to get pressure. But more importantly, off of play action, he was really accurate. Without play action, he was really accurate. I don't know. He just played quarterback really well. It seems like whatever issues that he had last week are gone. I don't know.
And his receivers were coming down with the ball.
Yeah, that helps. The really impressive CeeDee Lamb sideline catch, which a lot of people thought wasn't a catch, but I thought the field judge made the right call there. But yeah, I mean, you take a look at like someone like Tony Pollard getting a bunch of targets, somebody like CeeDee Lamb getting a bunch of targets. You're like, hey, there's a lot of opportunities for drops here, right? This is a running back running a deep route. I don't care how good of a receiving back you are. Very few running backs can run deep routes without dropping at least a couple of them. Yeah, never mind. Pollard caught all of them. CeeDee Lamb has had a drop problem this year. Not in this game. Was totally fine catching all of those passes again, depending on kind of how you want to define one of the two of those things. Dalton Schultz did all right. The Cowboys did not have the unreliable hands that the Vikings seem to have. Hawkinson got 9 targets, by the way. That is absurd.
What's great is all of a sudden they have a kicker that can hit that's like lights out too.
Yeah. Brett Maher has made, I think, all but one extra point this year, which is an important statistic for.
Boy, what's that like?
Yeah. Has made every kick inside the 29, every kick inside the 39, every kick inside the 49. He's been perfect from underneath 49. But unlike Greg Joseph, who's been pretty good at 50 minus, he's also 7 of 9 from 50 plus. And including in this game, he nailed a couple of those. So did he nail like a 60-yarder or something like that?
Yes, he did 2 in a row technically, because for whatever reason, they weren't done reviewing the catch, but they let them line up and kick, and then after the kick went through, like, wait, we weren't done.
Yeah, we waved that off. That never happened.
New York's not done with you. Hold on. Which doesn't seem like right or possible at all, but that's what they did.
Yeah. So he had
and then he hit it again.
So he had 3 50-plus yard kicks officially, 4 unofficially. Get a 53, a 50, and then that 60 twice. So 3 that count. Plus, a 27-yard field goal to open things, just for funsies, I guess. Yeah, they did all right there. But hey, Greg Joseph was 100%.
Well, for his sake, the one time that he came out and needed to do that, I'm glad that he was capable.
Yeah, hey, and his kickoffs?
His kickoff?
2 kickoffs. 2 kickoffs, right? Because the field goal. Great. Good job, man.
Yeah. Ryan Wright looked pretty good for a while. I'm looking for the positive, and there's not much here, folks.
Oh, I got to see Ryan Wright's PFF grade. Let's take a look at that real quick.
That's a man who's going to have to ice his leg.
Yeah.
Till Thursday.
God. Let's see. Punting. 70. Not bad. Net 43, so it could have been a little bit better there. But 3 inside the 20. Pretty high return percentage, but 3 inside the 20 out of 7. Not bad. Pretty decent hang time. 43.4 net. 338 total punting yards in this game. 338. That's not good, man.
Yeah.
That's so many.
If Yahoo would let me, I would allow punters to be drafted into the Hell League, and we would include this stat.
I think that's doable. Doesn't Yahoo have that?
Yahoo does not let you do punters yet.
Eventually. Soon.
Yes.
I'm sure. Because like a bunch of other platforms do have punters, so
God.
Yahoo soon will have it.
What I really need is I need an assistant to handle all of the leagues that we're in. Because I need an assistant. This is ridiculous. I need an assistant commissioner. I can be the figurehead. I need an assistant to do all the day-to-day stuff. We'll get to why in a little bit. Well,
that's right.
There's not... You've seen the mailbag. So
yeah.
There's not much more to say about the game. You get speedboat. You get sometimes these things happen. This is the day that everything went wrong.
Yep. There's a. I was googling Yahoo Fantasy Punters 1 second. There was, it looks like this has been a request that has been made. Um, yeah, the Vikings defense was bad. I went over a little bit of it. I think that a big part of it was that Andrew Booth, the I guess fourth string corner, it feels weird because Caleb Evans is like pretty clearly the backup right now. As the fourth round. Wait, hey, I guess the Bills have been starting a sixth rounder over a first rounder, so these things happen. But yeah, I mean, Andrew Booth clearly was like not like prepared in whatever way he needed to be prepared to play that game, and so he had a pretty bad time, which I think everyone has become familiar with. But you take a look, just I think just generally across the defense, not having Delvin Tomlinson, I think was really big. I thought, you got a good game out of Daniil Hunter. I thought that you didn't really get a good game out of Za'Darius Smith. This is probably his first bad game, but I thought you had a pretty good game out of Daniil Hunter. I thought you had some pretty decent games from like Patrick Peterson and Eric Kendricks. I thought Kendricks did all right, despite I think officially he gave up a number of yards in coverage, but it never seemed too bothersome for me. But it's all of these players that you either clearly had issues with going into the season as potential starters, or were like clearly not expected to start, right? So like Andrew Booth had a pretty bad game. Jonathan Bullard had a bunch of snaps. He didn't play all that well. Chandon Sullivan had a really bad game. Jordan Hicks, we brought that up. He had a pretty bad game. That is kind of like a big chunk of it, but a lot of it's just that the Vikings don't seem to have the schematic flexibility to kind of deal with what the Cowboys were doing. And so they were just kind of out of sorts the entire game. They did not get consistent pressure. They were not consistent in coverage. They clearly couldn't tackle. I mean, that's pretty obvious. So, yeah, a bunch of things went wrong. And it's like, it's not just that the Vikings were this average team going into the game, right? Like they were secretly an average team going up against secretly a good team. And so in that situation, you'd expect the good team to win, which, yeah, sure, that's what happened. But also everything just kind of went wrong for the Vikings, and not in a way that's like about ref bias. Like, yeah, we could talk about the Justin Jefferson stuff. We could talk about the catches that were ruled catches. But that's not really the difference. Just like a bunch of small things. The Vikings didn't recover the fumble that Kirk Cousins had. There was a fumble in the first place. You had a couple of, not just injuries, but like really key injuries, at certain points of the game. Just like a bunch of small luck-related things just flipped the other way. And so the Vikings were a worse team, and then also they were also an unlucky team, right? Which kind of explains this 37-point difference.
So that's going to be it for our discussion on the Cowboys game. There's not much more to talk about, and now let us never speak of it again until we get to the mailbag here. Quick note to everybody. So typically what we do for the Thanksgiving episode, we don't put out a second episode later in the week because it's Thanksgiving, it's Thursday, we're not recording or anything. So we typically include the preview of the next game in the Monday show. But the person we were going to have to do the analysis for it isn't available today. So unfortunately, what we're going to do is we're going to punt that to tomorrow. And if you are subscribed to Patreon, you will get the Patriots preview. That's what we're going to do. We're just going to put it up on Patreon. If you're interested in hearing the preview, check us out, patreon.com/Norse Code. You'll also be getting a bonus episode, behind the scenes stuff, including the behind the scenes stuff for the live show. And that'll be coming out on Thanksgiving proper. So if you're interested, check it out. But we're going to be doing the Patriots preview and a bonus episode this week over on Patreon. So patreon.com/Norse Code if you're interested. Let's get into the mailbag itself, and we start with Drop Play Dave, who asks, how fraudulent are our teams?
So Drop Play Dave, his secondary team is the Vikings, but his first love, unfortunately, is the Giants. That does mean he has a pair of Super Bowls, so maybe he should quit whining, but say a pair of Super Bowls in his memory. But yeah, super fraudulent, super fraud teams. Both of them lost this week, right? The Giants lost to the Lions.
Sure did.
Yeah. Oh boy. Well, I did bet on the line, so I guess I did see that coming. I mean, I would never gamble ever.
You know what really sucks is that the money I put down on Washington for the under is absolutely in jeopardy now that Carson Wentz is done.
Oh yeah, that's right.
One more win.
The problem is that like Heineke's playing all right.
Yeah,
like if Carson Wentz has done whatever, the backup's probably not going to be that great, even if he is going to be a little bit. Heineke's playing all right. Like, get rid of the fourth quarter turnover stuff. Yeah, he's fine.
Yeah, the money that we put down to bet against Carson Wentz because that was such a fun concept. Yeah, it's better. It's gone now. Taylor Heineke is the reason why we can't have nice things. However, I still have the under for the Bears, and that's still looking really good.
Yeah, even though Justin Fields is playing really well.
Yeah.
So
anybody who makes him pass, anyone who makes Justin Fields pass, they're gonna win that game. So
perfect.
Yeah. So yeah, we're both fraudulent. We're just gonna have to deal with it.
Yep.
The fellow you have sitting on your couch that's a skeleton, he should have known better.
Wearing a Vikings jersey.
Exactly. Kane asks, why was this game so easy to predict? And are the Vikings the only team in sports that instead of distracting you from the void and all of its emptiness, force you to stare directly into the void without blinking?
I feel like there are teams in other sports that do this. I feel like I don't know anything about hockey, but I do know that Canadian teams are very disappointing. I don't think anyone has any expectations of the Winnipeg Jets. It's just my vibe. It's the general feeling I get.
They've made the playoffs a number of times over the last couple of years, but there are sad sack teams. I think the one that you mean to say, let me provide this to you.
Well, let me make a guess, and then you can tell me because I'm going to pick a Canadian team.
Okay.
And specifically, I'm going to pick the Canadiens, right? Because I hear about the Toronto Maple Leafs all the time. Mm-hmm. They must be all right. I remember the Calgary Flames. I remember them doing all right historically. But the Canadians, that just, I don't know. They're from Montreal. They feel like they should be better. They feel like disappointments. I know they've had some hockey greats play for them.
The team,
so I'm gonna pick them.
The team that everyone makes fun of, the team that basically doesn't have a home stadium. Yeah, Arizona Coyotes.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So they're the saddest sack of franchises at the moment.
I will say the Bill Simmons level of losing does cap teams in warm weather environments. So there is a limit to how much the Arizona Coyotes can hurt you, but that's a good point. But yeah, I feel like that there are like the Sacramento Kings, right? That's a team that's way more disappointing than either the Timberwolves or the Vikings. Not because you expect them to be good and they fail, but because you expect them to be bad and they're somehow worse. But they don't really get the number one pick either. It's just brutal. It is brutal. That's my understanding of the Sacramento Kings. Again, a sport I don't know anything about. But yeah.
We've got a whole Discord channel devoted to sports Arif knows nothing about.
Yeah. Y'all were talking about like F1 in there recently. I was just like, all right, this Netflix thing has gone way too far. I do want to watch that Netflix TV show that got everyone into F1, but I don't want to become an F1 fan. That is like way too much work. Yeah, but I feel like the idea that the Vikings, whose sole purpose it is to distract you from the emptiness of life, then therefore forcing you to confront that emptiness of life, but deeper within your own soul because you made this choice. I feel like that is fairly characteristic of the Vikings. I mean, this has just been true of the Vikings, again, since time immemorial. If you remember the time I debated myself about half an hour ago.
Yeah.
This is just a character feature of the Vikings. Remember, Kierkegaard was a Scandinavian and therefore a Viking. I feel like that fits.
Well, let's go deeper into this because Max asks, Arif always talks about regression. Did the Vikings try to fit all of that regression into one game to better their odds moving forward?
Max, I feel like you missed some critical steps along the way in this discussion about regression. You're nearly there, man. It's what's the Will Smith get? He's confused, but the spirit is there.
Yeah.
I get it, Max, but no, I'm sorry. That's not how it works.
You know, if the Vikings were going to be blown out, and, you know, I'm glad that it happened in the middle of the year. Like, the Vikings are 8-2. Oh, damn. Like, good. The Vikings have a market correction. They get kicked in the face. They know what it's like to, like, lose that streak. Kirk Cousins loses his touchdown streak. I'm curious what the response is going to be. It's time that, like, this team got truly caught right on the chin, and now you have to get up and actually do something. That said, this is kind of a rough time in the schedule for it to happen. So,
yeah, it is. Yeah.
Well, Ingram's left foot asks, what feasibly could Kevin O'Connell do to avoid another Clint-type performance with a game plan that gets destroyed during the first quarter? Seems like grit teeth and do more of the same is not a winning solution.
The adjustments have come pretty late in games. I don't know. I will say the thing that separates KOC and Clint is that opening drive is a thing of beauty when there isn't a fumble to open it. But yeah, the adjustments, the adjustments have been late. It is very frustrating, and I don't really know kind of what the issue is because I feel like the Rams have famously been pretty good at these sorts of adjustments. And obviously, like, you can't transplant, like, hey, this team did something well, so when we hire somebody from that team, they're going to do that thing particularly well. But there was some indication that Kevin O'Connell played a pretty important role in that. So I don't really know kind of what the deal is here, why it takes so long to get those adjustments going, and kind of what they're doing to dissect. But I think part of it is just, hey, first year head coach. He's also a play caller for the first year. I think that might just be part of it. I think it's just like being a head coach and a play caller for the first time all at once is just going to create these problems. It's kind of one reason you don't trust these first year head coaches very much. Like Sean McVay did a great thing when he was a first year head coach. He didn't win the Super Bowl, right? I don't know. Like I think that this may be something that could be coming with time. There's just kind of a lot on this dude's plate.
Well, let's continue on with Ingram's left foot, because he asks, can we presume this loss was because the anti-hero A and his masked cohorts were unable to blow up the clock tower by midnight on Sunday morning? I think he's referring to the fact we didn't have the Luke Braun masks at the live show this year. And as a result, we didn't march toward anything. Yeah, I think it's entirely possible that you can blame this all on Luke Braun.
I mean, it's in the works.
Yeah.
But I feel like that. We shouldn't have trusted that there was only going to be one person said that they were going to turn off the masks, and the thing with logistics, you always got to have a backup plan, and we just never established one, so we never got around to. And the funny thing is, we might have been able to justify it as a business expense to go over to a FedEx and print off a bunch of Luke Braun.
Oh, we absolutely could have. And if the weather hadn't have been poor, we could have pulled it off too. But as it stood, I was sliding around a bit on 169, going, "Yeah, I'm going straight to the hotel and straight to the bar. Like I'm not messing around here. I'm gonna have barely enough time as it is." Fun fact: Arif had never seen the jersey in person before. And there's no way to prepare anybody for the size of that thing. It's remarkably large. And Arif, like, when he walked in, his eyes just was big as saucers. Like, how is this? This is the thing, huh? Wow.
It's incredible because, like, you get a sense of how big jerseys are, obviously, but the amount of space around it for nothing at all, just framing, right? The and obviously there's like 3 pictures on the bottom, right? There's one that's just like a Vikings logo. It actually looks kind of cheap, but the 2 on the either side of it, one with like Treadwell and Goodell, and the other one with just Treadwell at training camp. There's a lot of room that they have to put in there, and so you've got this giant. I guess shadow box is the wrong word. It's not quite that, but this giant frame around all of this. It was so like setting it up on an easel was fantastic. I don't know. Did it come with that easel?
I brought the easel.
Did you have one or did you buy one?
I had access to an easel.
Okay.
At this point, do you question why the producer just has things? No, you should just accept it, move on.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's very producer. Fair enough.
Yeah. So yeah, that was a lot of fun, but unfortunately, no, we didn't have the masks. Raul asks, is the scheme that Donatel is running quite similar to the Fangio scheme, but we simply lack talent? Or is Donatel not employing the scheme that we anticipated?
I mean, a little bit of both. I think that we're seeing lighter boxes and an expectation that the defensive tackles will kind of make up for those lighter boxes by playing a gap and a half. That's happening, essentially. The Vikings are only playing with 2 linebackers back there. But the back end is, I think, limited by the talent that they have. I think that they want more than, like, Cameron Dantzer's getting better, right? But he's already showing some issues, playing in more complex environments. And so the Vikings are not playing as complex a back end defense as you typically see in a Fangio scheme, or you saw in Denver last year. And I think that is because they don't trust the talent that they have to be able to mix it up as often. And so we're seeing a bunch of cover 6, a bunch of it, and it's very predictable. And so you have the ability to kind of pick it apart a little bit when you know what's coming. The whole point of always running the 2 high safety pre-snap is because it encourages a particular type of play, specifically a run, but it creates a lot of opportunities for disguise without stressing your safeties too much. You can spin one safety down into the box and play cover 1 or cover 3. You can keep those 2 safeties up and play, cover 2, cover 4, or cover 6. You can do all kinds of things with the initial pre-snap look being those 2 safeties being in the same spot every time. And they're not doing that this much this year. And yeah, it's not what I think we expected. It's also not what was advertised at the Staley defense, but I think that there is an understanding that the part of the reason for that is because you can't really trust, these corners to be able to run a match 3. I mean, you could trust Patrick Peterson to do it, but you can't really trust Cameron Dancer, maybe not Shannon Sullivan. You can't trust them to run the kind of cover 3 and cover 1 that you might want to, that allows you to really have as versatile a back end as you might want. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think that probably Donatel is a little bit too conservative in that regard and should be a little bit more aggressive about, putting someone like Cameron Dancer like on an island in cover 1 a little bit more often. But yeah, I think it is kind of related that those defensive issues kind of interlock with each other.
Beef Brewski asks, why isn't the Vikings offense better? Given their positional talent and an offensive-minded head coach, it seems like they should be putting up more points. Has their offense even improved when we compare it to Zimmer's teams? What the HE double hockey stick? Wow.
By the way, this is the guy that had me sign his book on demonology. Let me be clear.
It is indeed. Well, we posted some pictures of this on social media. We posted some pictures up on Twitter. While Twitter is up, it's worth checking out. We had a hell of a time, and we put some amazing pictures up there, so check it out.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Why isn't the Vikings offense better? Positional talent, offensive-minded head coach. Yeah, well, that's true. I think it is just Kirk Cousins is not playing Kirk Cousins football. And I mean that both in a good way and a bad way. I think that you're getting those points late because he is playing a little bit more improvisationally and all that. But the consistency and timing and rhythm with this offense does not seem to be there with me. I think that he's battling himself on when he should move on from that first read because the coaching point has him kind of sticking to that first read a little bit longer than he's used to, and figuring out what the timing of that is supposed to look like, where his second read is supposed to be, getting to that second read. All of that is just not really there for him. He's more likely to throw it away or to force those throws to his first read. They want him to throw, to receivers in contested situations a little bit more, and trust what Justin Jefferson can do, which, 2 weeks ago we saw, that can turn out pretty well. But I feel like he probably isn't comfortable with this offense when it comes to standard downs and distances. So I think that's part of it. I think that the idea is, when it all comes together, it's going to be a really great kind of explosion of offense, because you'll get the Kirk Cousins we're used to getting for like the first 3 quarters on first and second down, outside of the 2-minute drill, the really high efficiency standard level of play, or play in standard downs, that sees him string together like 10 consecutive completions or whatever, right? Setting a 19 completion record, that kind of guy, right? And seeing him do that, while also being kind of a guy who in late in games can adapt to the situation at hand, as opposed to continue to play, textbook style football. So I think that is part of it. That's just kind of a hypothesis. I don't really have, hard data on that, but, seeing how often the ball gets forced to Jefferson, and, we saw it work out well 2 weeks ago. We did not see it work out very well against like Philadelphia, right? Seeing how often that happens and knowing what the offense has the ability to do, I think that plays a pretty big role. Plus, if Hawkinson catches 2 more of these drops, I feel like we'd be talking about the offense just a little bit differently. Again, hard to say that they would win in that scenario, but we'd probably be talking about the offense a little differently.
Vignesh asks, did Micah Parsons go 0 dark LeBron yesterday?
Yes.
Yeah. Ed Donatello, is it just me, or would Duke Shelley actually lose a competition where all the cornerbacks were told to duke it out?
It's framed like a question, but this is definitely more of a comment.
Yes. From Jack, who asks, realistically, is it likely Kirk's just here to stay? Despite his technically inferior year based on just statistics, do you think his situational growth will convince Kwesi that he's a Viking beyond next year? Or is this Kirk just Kevin O'Connell schemed magic and can be done with another QB?
Yeah, I think that there is, the possibility that another quarterback can be, it could be better. It is, the issue is that, of course, it is really tough to find a better quarterback than Kirk Cousins. That is the point of the Kirk Cousins story, right? That it is really difficult to move on. I think that it is pretty unlikely at this point, unless the Vikings just collapse, right? Like, a good example is Carson Wentz. I'm not really comparing the two in any meaningful sense, but just to kind of get an example out of the way, is at the beginning of the season, the Colts were not that upset. They were actually pretty happy with Carson Wentz. Now, there's a bunch of stuff like related to locker room, apparently, and all that plays a role here. But Carson Wentz collapsed pretty late into the season in a pretty catastrophic way. If you take a look at what the passing statistics from 2021, I'm going to do a heat check on this take real quick before I fully get into it. But if you take a look at was the adjusted net yards per attempt for 2021, let's take a look at Carson Wentz. Yeah, Carson Wentz was 13th. Okay, so that's right. Was 13th in adjusted net yards per attempt for the 2021 season, right? Not that bad. Really tough for me to say that, but not that bad. They were largely all right with what Carson Wentz was doing, and then he threw a bunch of late game picks in backbreaking ways near the end of the season, on top of all of that like locker room stuff where he just wasn't, evidently, again, this is just me kind of reading into the reporting on it, not meshing with the locker room. They'd had enough. They were like, all right, that's fine. You can throw away the playoffs in 2 consecutive games. We're out of here. So barring like a collapse like that, where not anything that makes you think that the Kirk Cousins that we saw for the majority of the season, that was winning games and putting stuff up on the board, for game-winning drives and stuff like that, to anything that convinces you that that's not real, might encourage the Vikings to move on. But I think it would be a very unlikely and very difficult scenario to see, especially because like that is a known feature of Carson Wentz. That's not like a known feature of Kirk Cousins. Like, yeah, he's not like historically he's not a quarterback that many people think. Again, he currently leads the league in fourth quarter comeback, so I understand this. But historically, we don't understand him to be a quarterback that like wins games with fourth quarter comebacks very often. Historically, that's not the perception that we have around him. But like, he also isn't a guy that like throws wins away late in games with pick sixes. That's just not who he is. That's not the frustration people have about him. Carson Wentz is that guy. And so when he did that, we were like, oh, well, there it is. Yep. He's playing hero ball again, and he can't. He doesn't need to do that. Especially like these like 90-yard pick sixes at the opposing goal line. That's just rough, man. That's not really what Cousins does. He threw, especially the first year with Minnesota, a fair share of like red zone picks that were like really annoying and backbreaking, but they weren't like this devastating, what the heck are you doing kind of stuff, right? So yeah, I think that unless we see this kind of late season breakdown where the Vikings, who are now 8-2, if they finish the season like 8-9, or they just go a 7-loss streak or something like that, like, okay, yeah, then maybe we'll move on. But barring something really unlikely like that, which now that I've spoken it into existence, no, I think that they'll probably get that second year out of him. You know, the contract has a second year in it. I don't really care that much about that fact because you can trade that second year contract anyway. So if you really want to move on, you can. But as it stands right now, I think that he's going to be the quarterback next year. I think they'll be excited about it because of what he's done this season, despite kind of the statistical decline. And I think that they probably see it somewhat similar to me, that they expect him with this new offensive environment to take a leap forward next year more than anything else.
Ask the Jets what they would do for a competent quarterback right now.
Right, exactly. Look, Cousins only scored 3 points against the Cowboys, and the Patriots are just as good of a defense. But in that situation, like that Jets game, you put Kirk Cousins in there instead of Zach Wilson, they're scoring more than 3 points. They probably don't punt that final punt.
No.
They probably win the game.
Nobody outpunts their coverage there, outkicks their coverage, yeah.
Yeah.
Haley asks, on the K-Fan pregame show, Kevin O'Connell's mom mentioned that the family has, quote, rituals for games.
Oh.
Did the extended O'Connell family presence at the game cause their magics to be thrown off? Is there anything that can be done to rectify this?
Okay, very good question and good catch. I didn't catch that, Haley. So, really important that we've got a bunch of, what does Elon Musk call them? Citizen journalists. Sorry, Haley, I didn't mean to impugn you like that.
Yeah, but, that's an apology. Yeah,
yeah, I'm sorry, but I'm really great that we've got people that pay attention to this sort of really important thing. I think that that's fair. I think it's a fair question. That's not my interpretation. Not saying my interpretation is correct. I think that yours is just as valid in this particular instance. But my interpretation is what it was a couple of weeks ago, that the way that they had prepared for this Cowboys game was that they had already cast that spell. That spell had been cast far too early or with the wrong time frame in mind, right? They were supposed to get Cooper Rush. And in a sick, perverted way, they did get him. But they were supposed to get Cooper Rush, the starting quarterback, and the universe conspired to hurt Dak's thumb a couple of weeks too early. And so I think it wasn't that you know, the magical energies heading into the game were a unique problem. It was that the magical setup, again, first year head coach, right? I mean, sometimes you can't, you just make these mistakes. Before the season, when these magics were cast, there was some sort of mistake. Either there was a break in the seal, right? And they didn't, or maybe they possessed some, or they summoned some sort of entity and they didn't complete the salt circle. They used kind of the wrong. What is it? It's not hieroglyphs. It's not cryptographs. They used the wrong symbols.
Are you talking about runes at this point?
Yeah, they used the wrong runes, or maybe they misspelled one of the runes.
Here's the problem. Here's the problem, Arif.
No, I think I'm right.
No. Here's a problem. So 2 weeks ago, you you're pleading with the audience, please stop sending in these questions about the supernatural, about witches, about the occult. Please, this is where everything went. No, you don't know where I'm going. So, Arif, where did we go for lunch on Friday before I left town?
We went to a sushi place.
We did. We went to Momo, correct?
Yeah.
So, what's across the street from Momo? Did you notice?
No, man, I picked it off of like Yelp reviews, man.
So, you say this. I believe that you waited for my car to drive off before you walked back over to check it out, because I parked.
What is there?
I parked in front of Magus Books and Herbs.
No.
She noticed it before I did.
No, I'm looking at way.
She sent this to me. This is absolutely what happened. Across the street from the sushi restaurant.
You're making this up.
I am not making this up. Absolutely not. This is what happened.
Okay, I don't see it on Google Maps. I don't see it.
You're blind, or you're not looking it up correctly. This is what happened. I'm sending you the link right now.
It's right there.
It's literally across the street.
It is. No.
So,
oh my God! You click on the website. The first thing there says ritual tools.
It does.
And you go down and it says ceremonial magic, and it spells it with the K.
It does,
God,
doesn't it?
Oh,
I parked literally right in front of their door.
No, I didn't see because I parked because I didn't think they had a parking lot. So I turned off the street before we even got to. Oh my God! I parked on a side street because I didn't think because Central doesn't have very good parking.
Yep, it's northeast. I was surprised to be able to park without paying. But apparently the witches just have that agreement.
About us. Okay. Founded in 1992 by Roger Williamson, Magus Books and Herbs is your one-stop shop for magical, spiritual, and herbal supplies. Whether you are curious about the spirit world, a seasoned ceremonial practitioner, or somewhere in between, they're baby witch friendly. Somewhere in between, we have the supplies you need to be successful in your spiritual journey. Oh my God, there's a backstory.
Yes.
It's a little known fact that Magus Books owes its existence to a book Roger wrote and published shortly after his move from the United Kingdom. Of course, he's from the UK. Moved from the United Kingdom to Minneapolis in the mid-1980s. The Sun at Night. At that time, there were very few options for reviews and advertising within the genre, so he took it upon himself to catalog his own library and publish the list as a mail-order catalog. It wasn't long before a major distributor of metaphysical books, okay, I assume it's books about the metaphysical and not, like, these books are really difficult to pick up because they exist in multiple dimensions at once.
I don't know. I watched a guy who was clearly strung out on something at a Hugo's about 3 years ago, walking through someplace asking about metaphysical light bulbs, and we both looked at him just like, I don't know what to tell you, dude.
It wasn't long before a major distributor of metaphysical books picked up The Sun at Night, which expanded Roger's options for sales. As orders increased from his catalog, Roger decided it was time to expand into the retail space.
So the point of the story is that we went out for sushi on Friday as a bit of a celebration for how well the live show went. And I literally parked in front of the occult bookstore that was across the street from the great sushi. It was Momo's great sushi.
Ooh,
but
fantastic.
Yeah.
Take it. So it comes with complimentary miso soup. Take like a second before you slurp the soup. It's pretty hot when it comes out.
So anyway, I've been sitting on that since Friday. I've been sitting on that and have been reminded repeatedly. So I had to say it. It's amazing. Let's get back into some depressing stuff. Jack Rackham.
I'm sadder now.
Well, if you didn't know where to get your wands, now you do, because they do sell wands.
Great. Good for them. I hope they like the free advertising.
Now, just a reminder, folks, Magus Books over in Northeast. Let's see if I can get an address on this. How ridiculous is this particular moment? I like how in the address at the very bottom, it says Magus Healing Center, company address, Minneapolis, Minnesota. And Minnesota is actually spelled incorrectly, too, on the bottom of their website.
Oh, my God.
That's beautiful. That is fantastic. Magus Books over in Northeast. Check it out when you stop over at Momo. Jack Rackham asks, after a game like that, particularly on a short week, is there any benefit to reviewing game film, or is it best to just move on?
I mean, typically they don't do as much film review after games as you might expect in the NFL. And a lot of that is kind of on your own anyway. But yeah, I think that given that it's a short week, it just makes a little bit more sense to pick up your opponent film as soon as you can and start breaking them down and coming up with a game plan, because you've got such little time to implement your game plan. You've because the game plan install is typically 3 days anyway. And so if you just cut out like the Tuesday, right, and you compress the Monday into reviewing the game film, yeah, it is pretty difficult to actually review the film. But again, reviewing film from the previous week is a very small part of what happens in an NFL practice week.
Next question, we're going to go down to Nolan Kaler, who's been trying like hell the last couple of weeks to get us to talk about North Code. And unfortunately, we didn't get an opportunity to do it the last couple of shows, building up to the Grey Cup. And so I'm here to say that...
Which sucks, because sometimes we've even included it in the docket of questions we're going to answer,
Yep.
and then I go on too long about some other question, we have to cut it. So we're not intentionally ignoring North Code, but I feel like this particular question comes as a result of our neglect of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
Which is funny, because the moment that I saw that Jalen Reagor was catching passes from Nick Mullins, I went, for my own, this is self-care at this point, I have to change the channel.
And the Grey Cup was on.
So I proceeded to watch most of the Grey Cup.
How did the 3-down series treat you?
You know what? The Bombers did really well until they choked at the end.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
There's a Vikings legend playing for the Argonauts.
Yep. John Balthazar McLeod. He's going by McLeod now.
Oh, come on, man.
McLeod Bethel Thompson. MBT is the quarterback, or was the starting quarterback anyway for the Argonauts. He hurt his hand by the end of the game, so he wasn't out there as much. But yep.
So they brought in Chad Machine Gun Kelly, and I call him that not because of the musical artist, but because he threatened to shoot a crowd of high school students with his machine gun. Wonder why he's not in the NFL.
Yeah, well, he's good enough for the CFL, and they ended up winning. So Nolan Kaler asks, for North Code, were our brothers in Bud Grant so bad that they cost our Bombers their third consecutive Grey Cup by way of a missed extra point?
Okay, first of all, so bad that you lose your third consecutive...
Losing third consecutive is kind of written oddly here.
So they won 2.
Yes, they were going for the third.
They lost a chance for the three-peat, right? So this is like that is the weakest curse I could possibly imagine. That you don't get the three-peat. I still don't know how to pronounce that quarterback's name. Zach Caleros?
I watched it. I'm not much help.
All right, so let's pretend that is correct. From my understanding, this guy is like a CFL legend. Like, he's going into the Hall of Fame immediately. He's going to skip the line. But I did want to point out that they did have some AAF superstars like Casey Sales, the Birmingham Iron, and they have former Gopher Drew Wolotarski, I think. So there's some reason for me to have some affection for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And of course, they missed a critical extra point. They lost 24-23.
Yeah.
So
they choked at the end. They choked so bad.
I think it's because we kept ignoring the North Code questions. I don't think it has anything to do with what the Vikings did. I think it's because we ignored the questions week after week.
Yeah, we're just going to take the blame for this one.
Yeah.
What's funny is that, so I'm watching it.
And Brian Cole plays for the Blue Bombers too. Hey, that's another former Viking.
So I'm watching it, and I was reminded of a Nolan Kaler question from like 2 weeks ago, where he mentioned that half of Florida Georgia Line was playing the halftime show. Because I was looking up, I looked up at the TV and went, "What the hell is this?" Oh, well, this is odd. This is just, sure, why not? All these people look very happy to be there. Just wrong. Logan asks, after my 2-year-old got lead poisoning and splinters from a Reef's pacifier idea, he's now pacifier free thanks to James's advice and a new T-Rex.
That just sounds like you used untreated. Okay, that's not my fault.
Well, maybe don't speak that.
Did you know pacifiers used to be wood?
Yeah, well, you also were suggesting some questionable things for the babies to be sucking on. So, question for Arif: how should we handle Santa Claus as non-believers and anti-fun parents?
Okay, well, if you're anti-fun, this one's very easy. You get your kids to tell all the other kids that Santa Claus isn't real, so they can be that kid that everyone hates. That's the anti-fun. But if you just want to be, I don't know, fun, apathetic, fun, I don't know how else you put it, and non-believers, you just be condescending, right? Like you tell the kids that you know the truth, that the other kids don't know, and that it would hurt them to tell them. Your kids will still probably tell the other kids, but now they know they shouldn't. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Do you want credit for giving gifts to your kids? I feel like that's not like a bad thing, right?
I feel like my son has like maybe one more year left.
Are you going to break it to him?
Where he's in it. He's already been told by some kids, and
right.
He's on the border of it, but like, so I took him out to get his hair cut the other day, and the woman is talking to him and like making small talk about school and stuff, and he's sitting and conversing. It turns out he's a natural at this sort of thing. And she asks him, "Do you still believe in Santa Claus?" Which was like which is like the Trump thing. And this isn't a political podcast, but do you remember when Trump asked the kid, "Are you old enough to still believe in Santa?" And the kid's like, "Yeah."
Wait, hold on. Do people older than me not believe in Santa? What's going on here?
Yeah, so asked him, and you know what? My son totally, yep, sure do. He's like, okay.
Did not examine that statement at all.
Did not look into it at all.
Wow.
Was
kids,
like,
man.
Oh my God, son, you are going to, the world is going to hurt you so badly.
It's so good. Like she gave him a line.
I love you so much.
She threw him a line.
I was like, really? That's where you put it? That's where, oh my God.
Yeah, but just for context, I never believed in Santa because when you grow up in a Muslim household and you're the one that tells your parents what Christmas is, Santa is just like not on the docket.
As it turns out, yeah.
Yeah, you're just like, no, you buy me gifts. That's what happens.
We're blending in. And by blending in...
Right. Yeah, by blending in, you get me an Xbox.
I'm envisioning your older brother putting together like a 5-point argument.
Right, yeah.
As to why this is good for the two of you.
Yeah, so like I don't know how he handled it because it was just like, oh yeah, all these other kids believe in Santa. That's not unusual. All these other kids always believe in different stuff than we believe. So, whatever. I'm still going to get gifts because I've been very annoying about this holiday.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
James's younger brother, who I'm friends with, is getting gifts for Christmas. Why can't I?
Yeah, right. Exactly. It turns out. So obviously, I was like an annoying little brat when I was growing up. as is every kid, but you can imagine that I in particular was.
As somebody who experienced Arif at this young age, I can confirm this.
Yeah, right. That's right. I don't think I ever told any other kid that Santa Claus wasn't real, even though I had never believed in Santa Claus. So it is possible, I guess, even for annoying little know-it-alls, to not do that. It was just like something I was just like, yeah, one time I told my neighbor that Jesus wasn't God, and that did not go very well. So I'm just going to stop. I'm just not going to do any of that. They can all believe in the Easter Bunny or whatever, and I'm just going to get chocolate. We're all happy at the end.
I'm just envisioning your parents like troubleshooting the situation.
Yeah, like, well, okay, so I tell, you know, they're like the neighbor across the street. We're living in a cul-de-sac. We would, you know, hang out and play and, you know, whatever, right? And she had mentioned, you know, that Jesus Christ is God, and I was like, that's not right. That never heard that before in my life. That's not true. And we argued about it as kids argue with like absolutely no way to resolve this discussion, just like yes and no. She starts crying because I was a very vociferous kid. She goes to her parents. Her parents are like, okay, you can't come to this house anymore. And I was like, really? It's that serious? God is that serious to you? Which is just a very funny thing for a kid.
7-year-old you is like, what the hell?
What is going on here? And so I go back to my house and I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to play with her again. They got really mad about this like Jesus Christ thing. Have you heard about this? And they're like, Arif, some people believe that Jesus Christ is God. We don't. That's just like a thing. And I was like, oh, it's crazy that, you know, we believe different things. And they get like really upset about that. That's nuts.
And it turns out it's the source of most of the conflict in the world. Yeah. And at your 7-year-old brain, it's like, why is this a thing?
What is going on here?
What, wars have been fought? Like, planes and really?
Huh, weird. And my dad was like, yeah, you should probably just not bring that up again. I was like, yeah, it was pretty touchy.
Well, we're fully off the rails here, folks. Let's embrace the Thanksgiving.
Well, I just got accused of like putting splinters in a child's mouth. I think we've been off the rails for a second.
Yeah, agreed. Kenneth Allen asks, is there anything to the idea of hangover games? It seems unlikely, but they also seem very common for the Vikings. Some potential explanations away. Coaching, overtime game fatigue, or just the fault of our memories because they're so harrowing. So are they real, and if so, why?
I think someone did a small study of this, although study is a strong word. They looked at it from a Vikings perspective, and I guess historically for the Vikings, this has been the case to a degree that it seems kind of compelling. But I don't know if that applies to the Vikings this year. They've had 5 fourth quarter comebacks. Is the only one that counts the Bills for the hangover game hypothesis? I think we're selectively picking and choosing. I think we're selectively picking and choosing for this one. Because like you can construct after the fact, you know, which games are hangover games. Like, oh yeah, obviously the week 1 game against the Packers was a hangover game. Everybody was juiced up. The Packers are the division rival. It was such a big game. Everyone comes out of that, and then they go flat against the Eagles. That was a hangover game. And then you go into like the next week against the Dolphins, and it's like, I don't know if that was the next week, but you go into the Dolphins game, you're like, yeah, they really gutted one out there. A fourth quarter comeback against a team that, you know, was putting pressure on the quarterback all day. Like, yeah, sure. You know, they started Skylar Thompson, but Teddy was the quarterback for most of the game. Beat him, that feels good. I mean, this is a winning team. You know, this is just more than just the quarterback. But then the next game wasn't a hangover game, so we don't talk about it. So, yeah, there was like 4 or 5 fourth quarter comebacks this year. Only one of those counts. I don't buy it.
Also from Kenneth Allen, for Arif's B Corner, the college I teach at has chosen a book called The Music of Bees as our campus-wide reading for the next semester.
You're kidding me.
We are encouraged to work themes of the book into our courses, but unfortunately I am a philosopher and thus have very little useful knowledge.
That's accurate. I've seen you argue with other philosophers in my mentions. All useless. Also, I just want to pause here before we get to the actual question. Your college has a campus-wide reading list or something? Like, I've never heard of this.
Yeah, apparently. The only bee knowledge I have is from noted apiologist Arif Hassan and pertains to bee races.
I've talked a lot about beekeeping that has nothing to do with bee races.
So, given
it's not my fault that is what you retained.
So, given college expectations, do I have a moral obligation to teach my students about bee races? If so, what does Arif suggest I teach them about the bee race wars?
Okay, there were never any bee race wars. They're just bees. They don't have race wars. There's no structural system of bee races. There's no bee supremacy. Like that's not. They don't have a social system that allows for any of that. We're just imposing it on them. Come on, like, you're a philosopher, man. Ah! Okay, so your moral obligation to teach your students about bee races is, if at all possible, talk about how this podcast got off the rails about bee racism and how it exploded as I tried to explain that, yeah, it's called a queen bee, but they don't, like, have royalty. Or, hey, yeah, they're called Russian bees because they come from the area that we call, but they're not like, they're bees. They don't recognize borders or have a political system. Like, just like, that's your moral obligation. I don't know what the book, The Music of Bees, is about. Is it even about bees? That feels weird for a college to assign. But I think that's, we have created a bee society based on the language that we use to talk about bees, and it's weird, and it doesn't apply to what bees actually do.
I'm actually, I'm on Google Maps right now seeing if there was a beekeeping store also across the street from the sushi place, but unfortunately I'm not finding it.
Good.
That's too bad. That's basically a one-stop shop at that point. Tim asks, the Minnesota Fighting Vikings are 0-1 in every single game since the Laquan Treadwell jersey has been in the hands of someone not named James. It's widely accepted that the Treadwell jersey is a cursed object, but how much should we entertain the idea that James's ability to control such an evil may attribute to the Vikings' level of mediocre success, as we're now seeing what happens when it's in the other's hands? Also, does Ed Ingram have a Chris Reed voodoo doll that he allegedly jabs repeatedly to keep him inactive?
And so we did talk about the impact that the Treadwell jersey curse had on the Vikings as a result of James bringing it to the Vikings facility, to the front door, and then
within a mile of the front door. Let's not do the literal thing here.
You'd be like, knocked on the Vikings facility and said, "Hey, I've got you." I did
the Eric Andre thing. Was let me in.
I think there's that. There's also the dispersal of the curse evil. All of that is kind of part of the discussion. As for the Ed Ingram, Chris Reed voodoo doll, again, this just kind of reminds me of the Drew Samia discussions way back. Like, again, Chris Reed, again, a little bit different because we have like a history of production from him to take a look at on other teams. But I just feel like, I think it was Kenneth Allen asked a couple of weeks ago, like, hey, how Arif, you suggested just benching the rookie and then maybe later bringing him back. How often does this happen? And I couldn't come up with any examples. And so maybe, it doesn't happen all that often. But they should. I think that what they're scared of is stunting his development at this point or hurting the chemistry along the offensive line or something along those lines. Those are legitimate fears. But I think you should just do it. Just do it. Just bench Ed Ingram. See, like Chris Reed, it's not Drew Samia. We have some history of how Chris Reed plays when he starts. It's not great. It's fine. Do it.
Let's go to Jesse from Brooklyn, who asks, so, turns out Vikings legend and future Ring of Honor member Chris Herndon was just suspended for the rest of the season. Only thing is, he's not on a team. So, the fact that the NFL can suspend individuals regardless of if they're on a team or not is news to me. But how far does this go? Are they going to suspend Brett Favre indefinitely for his Mississippi shenanigans? Do they suspend Herschel Walker for doing Herschel Walker things? Do they suspend Arif for being just too good at being a quarterback? Where does the madness end?
So there is this perception that when a player retires, they like signed some paperwork saying that they have retired. And that's not really the case. What happens when a player announces their retirement is they're basically telling other teams to just F off. I don't want to listen to you. My agent is basically no longer working for me, essentially. So you will not be able to contact me to play for your team. There is some paperwork that you eventually have to file, like with the NFLPA for like pension and stuff like that. And so that is kind of where the idea comes from. And so it's not as if the NFL looked at every player that was like retired and took them off the list, right? It is a fairly informal process. So it is theoretically possible that the NFL could suspend Brett Favre. But I think that they kind of want to limit it to people who might actively be looking for work and are probably people who have appeared on the transaction wire. I imagine Chris Herndon has worked out for some teams, even if he has not been signed by teams. And so in doing has been on the NFL radar until they were suspending him. So I think that is probably the line that they drew. By the way, I looked this up. We still don't actually know why Chris Herndon was suspended. It was just announced that he'd be suspended for 8 games or until the end of the season. So cool. Don't know why he was suspended for the Jets for 4 weeks for, I believe, driving under the influence. Don't quote me on that. Look that up. But I don't know if that's related, but that's all the information that we have. So that a weird moment. So yeah, I don't think they'll suspend Herschel Walker for all of this.
No,
it just seems like probably don't do that.
Don from Ohio asks, how can James justify disqualifying me in the Hell League for not starting a kicker, which gives him a win, shocker, when he's never been strict with the rule in the first place?
So James, I'm sure you can answer the question on your own, and I'll give you that opportunity. But I do want to say, Don, when you're in the Hell League and you expect consistency, you have signed up for the wrong rodeo. I don't know why you thought that this would be consistent commissioning. I have pointed out to James a couple of times, hey, I should probably be disqualified this week. But every single time I pointed it out, I had already lost, so it didn't matter.
and that happens more often than you'd think, is that when people play in the Hell League and they don't start a kicker, or they have too many kickers on their, like, I occasionally get a complaint and I'll go in and I'll do something about it. But for the most part, when I see people not starting a kicker, it's a game they lose, because a kicker can score upwards of like 160 points, as we discovered this week.
Yeah. Well, how much did Tyler Bass get?
A lot. Conversely, however,
I assume Brett Maher also got like a ton of points.
Conversely, it's amazing to see how negative a score can go with Graham Gano. Missed 2 extra points this week.
That's rough. Yeah. So, in the Norse Code leagues, it is advantageous to not start a kicker without the disqualification rule. In the Hell League, it really is not, because you are sacrificing probably about 40 points, upwards of, like James said, 160. And yeah, you're missing. You're shortcutting the opportunity to lose 50 points instead, but it's pretty tough to win without a kicker.
In this particular instance, Don was flaunting it on social media, how much he loves the Hell League and how badly he was beating me. And I looked into it, and he cut off the screenshot to show that he had started a kicker who was inactive.
Don. Oh my God. Well, I mean, it's one thing to have like inconsistent enforcement of a core rule of the Hell League. Mm-hmm. It's another to flaunt it, like bring attention to it. That's crazy.
Yep. You have no one. You have no one to blame but yourself here.
You were speeding and yelling at the cops, bragging about how much faster your car was than theirs. Yep. That's what you were doing.
As for how I can justify it, this is exactly how I justify it. Idiot. I'm going to flaunt this in front of the one person who can do something about it. I am the leader of the Hell League. I need an assistant.
I am the law.
I have too many Hell Leagues, and I need somebody to check on this. I may need to like find some way to deputize someone, or just not be in all of these things.
Terrifying.
Yeah, I may need a deputy in hell, but
hell has become sufficiently bureaucratic,
which shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody who's dealt with bureaucracy. Let's go to Eric, who asks, for the consensual chili corner, standard beef and white chicken chilies are boring to me. What's a new variation to bring to the neighbors after obtaining a written affidavit confirming they want to receive it? So we're out
Did we explain this on air?
We're out at lunch on Friday, and Arif proceeds to spend 20 minutes talking about the chili thing, and it's so dumb and so funny.
There's new discourse like the past 2 days too. Like what I explained to you had already been a week of chili discourse. I don't think we have time, but like
if there's a short version, we should do it.
Okay, so my mutual Twitter follow noticed that her neighbors, who are like these college kids that are actually pretty quiet, so she kind of wants to keep them around, had been getting a bunch of DoorDash orders. She notices that because, where she lives, the addresses are not always consistent, so they sometimes show up at her door a little bit confused. So, they've been getting a lot of DoorDash orders. When she like drives into park, she notices that they've got like a ton of pizza boxes or whatever. No judgment or anything, but she's like, hey, they're not cooking that much. It'd be kind of a neighborly thing to cook for them. So she makes some chili for them and tries to give it to them. But they're not home when she shows up. And so she's like, all right, I'll just come back the next day. And the next day, she noticed the car wasn't in the driveway, so they still weren't home. So she does it on the third day, right? And they're like, oh my God, thank you. This tastes really good. Hey, we noticed that your fence was out of repair. Can we repair it for you? This seems like a totally normal thing, right? It's just like what neighbors do. This is so idyllic. I have not experienced this in my brutal hell of the city landscape that I live in. I would love for neighbors to be that stereotypically friendly and neighborly, right? That seems so cool, right? No problems with the story, right, James?
Nope, this is accurate.
Cool. Fantastic. Guess what? She's a villain now. Like a bunch of people got out of their gourds. I guess I shouldn't use the word gourd. No, it's fine. Got out of their gourds.
Tis the season for gourds anyway.
Yeah. Got out of their gourds about this. First, they thought she was a trans woman, and so they were just like really transphobic about it for some reason. And they're like, oh, she's creepy. She's like being a predator on these young boys, which is like, first of all, they're college kids. They're like adults. Like, don't be weird about this. And then they found out that she wasn't trans, and so they still decided to hate her, but for like other new reasons that they had to invent, like that it was ableist to give them chili. And just there's so much for a week, like 30,000 quote tweets on this original photo of chili, of people just being mad that she gave and like, I'm particularly upset because like she's already been run off of Twitter a couple of times for like absolutely bad faith actions from other people. She's been harassed. I'm extremely familiar with Twitter harassment campaigns, as people who have listened to this podcast for a couple of months now know, not because of anything that's happened to me. I'm fine, but just because of things that have happened to my friends. But like, she has seen some of the worst of it I've ever seen. And for me, that is saying a lot. But like she was accused, like, okay, related to this, she was like accused of being a white savior, which like, you don't know what the race of the college kids were. And also, that's not what that means. That's just not what that means. That means a thing. That's not what that is. I don't know how else to put it. A white savior complex is a thing I'm willing to discuss on a political podcast at another time. It's totally valid. It makes sense in certain contexts, and you're just misapplying it to be mean to some person. And turns out the kids were white, but also that didn't matter to you anyway, did it? Also, they weren't disabled, but like like the whole thing about the ableism is like offering unsolicited help to people with disabilities can be infantilizing and condescending. And yeah, I agree with that. That's not this. That's not this at all. And also, there's a whole consent conversation, which is where the name of the corner comes from, the consensual chili corner, because the neighbors did not consent to receive the chili. But actually, here's the really interesting thing about the whole thing. Yes, they did. At the door, when they said, thank you for the chili, they consented. There was a point in the process where they could consent, and at that point they consented. Why are we using consent language to talk about giving food to people? That feels like you're trivializing a lot of the consent discourse. That's where I am right now. I'm really upset. The chili idea I have is probably to mix ground lamb or veal into that a little bit, not full veal or full lamb, or maybe venison. Again, I don't think you should go 100% one meat, but I think if you mix beef with venison, or mix beef with bison, or mix beef with veal, which basically beef, I think that you could create, I like multi-meat chilies that way. I think you can create a lot of interesting flavor contrast, maybe throw a little bit of pork into it. Pork, that one, you should probably figure out that one you should know what your with the dietary restrictions of whoever you're giving the chili to. That one makes sense. But if pork works, yeah, throw some pork in there. And you can also just kind of vary the spices that you're putting in. I like putting a little bit of Chinese 5-spice into chili. I think that can taste pretty good. There's a little bit of something. I make fun of Cincinnati chili all the time for how much cinnamon and chocolate is in there. But it's not like a bad instinct to put a little bit of cinnamon and nutmeg and some of the similar flavors that are in Chinese 5-spice. Just, obviously don't go overboard. But yeah, I think that is probably a fun variation. Again, and it doesn't have to be ground. A lot of chili these days is ground, but traditionally it's not. You can have like smaller chunks of meat in there that are chili. Obviously, that comes up quite a bit. But I think if you're mixing meats, it's a little bit better to do it ground. So that is my thought on that. Oh, also, if you don't like beans and chili, I've learned this. You don't like black people? I guess that's a thing that came up in the discourse too. I'm lost. My head is spinning. But yeah, I really like venison and chili.
It was wild to hear the first time, and it's still wrong to hear the second. So
I think I added some new details that I didn't have the time to give to you the first time.
I remember just going, she
got written up in the Washington Post. You saw that, right? They wrote a story. They were like, hey, was she wrong? And they, first of all, they never contacted her, but they contacted some like etiquette experts, and the etiquette experts were like, well, it's different. The world is different than it was 20 years ago, but no. And then the whole comment section was supportive. They're like, why are we talking about it? She made food for her neighbors. That seems like pretty nice. And like, okay, if you have an allergy and some food shows up at your place and you can't eat the food, just like say it's fine. Just say it. Just you're not like, that's fine. Just say it or take it and throw it out. I don't care.
Yeah.
But like
the big thing that came out of this was that the person that all this happened to, the person who made the chili, was concerned they were going to be the last villain of Twitter.
Yeah, right, because this was right as everyone was convinced Twitter was dying, and there had already been some like pretty great candidates for main characters. One that I can't even say to maintain our iTunes rating. But the blank part is true. If anyone knows what discourse I'm talking about, they know exactly what I mean. But her chili thing came in right under the line. Like as the week was ending after the Elon acquisition of Twitter, and people were like, "Oh, it's gonna die," and I saw a wild timeline as a result of people thinking it was gonna die. She was like, "Oh, I'm the last main character of Twitter," which, as Maple Cocaine says, there is one goal on Twitter. Every day there is a main character, and the goal is to not be it. And she was a main character for 7 days, as everyone thought the website was dying, still might die, and she was just going to be the last main character, which for an innocuous, like so many main characters that we've had, it's their fault. Bean Dad, just open the can of beans, man. That's on you. She just made some chili for her neighbors.
Yeah, and some people make a list on quarterback attractiveness and then go off and privatize their entire Twitter account. So
a somehow problematic list on, but by somehow, everybody who's calling it problematic is in the correct, is right. That is a screwed up list. But like, how do you stumble into that? How do you cancel yourself with that list? That is nuts. That, like, if you told me, hey, I'm going to make a list of who the most attractive quarterbacks are, I'd be like, that's not content I'm interested in, but go ahead. I'm sure a bunch of people will love it. It didn't cross my mind that you could have found a way to cancel yourself. And yet.
What a fun way to attempt to be funny and fail miserably.
Oh, yeah. Which, by the way, absolutely cancelable. I think that was correct to cancel that.
Tank B asks, for a Reef's cooking corner / conspiracy corner.
What?
Going through the store yesterday, my wife got a turkey instead of a ham, noting that the turkey was $26, while the ham, which itself was less of a ham and more of a pressed-together meat cube, was $50. What? Can Arif please explain how this was clearly a ploy done by Big Turkey and the Illuminati, and how the Masons come into play, and explain ultimately why Kirk Cousins turned into a duck on Sunday?
A very, very clever way to finish that out. I'll just say that I don't know if Tank B is in Minnesota. Actually, I've met Tank B. Decent chance Tank B is in Minnesota. The turkey lobby in Minnesota is not unpowerful. I wouldn't say that they are, say, like a shadowy cabal controlling the government purse strings or anything like that. But, they probably benefit from at least low-level tax breaks in the state, which are a form of a subsidy, and maybe some bigger subsidies after that. Generally speaking, though, pig farming is far more subsidized in the United States than turkey farming, and is more efficient from a cost perspective. From a calorie perspective, I don't know. So I don't really know how that happened. You are talking about a more processed ham, but typically that ham is processed in a way that reduces cost per unit instead of increases it. Turkey is wild expensive at this point of the year. I really don't know what's going on here. Maybe there was like a deal. I don't know. Most places run out of turkey. By the way, if you wanted a turkey, first of all, fix your life. Second, you probably should be getting one as you're listening to this, and they're probably out. But yeah, I don't. I don't know. Did you compare it per like unit of usable meat? I don't like that's weird to me.
Well, let's end this with a discussion from Gazank, who asks, if the president pardons a turkey every year, then that implies that there are turkeys that have committed crimes worthy of the death penalty. What sort of crimes do you think these birds have been pulling off, and do you think they just need a better bird lawyer?
It seems like the market of turkey pardons is extremely limited. So all a lawyer would do, a better bird lawyer versed in bird law, would do is get you to the front of the pardon line, and it just feels like that's already a pretty low probability proposition at best anyway. So, obviously they commit a number of crimes. I was going to come up with a bunch of pun bird crimes, but that's not who I am, and I don't want to be that person. So let's just say they committed treason and grand larceny. And Grand Theft Auto. I don't know. I don't like turkeys. They probably did all those things. There's a lot of turkeys just like roaming around Minnesota. And in particular, there have been like this group of turkeys just like 3 blocks from where I live. I think they know that I don't like them.
But Arif, why don't you like turkey?
No, we're not doing this. I've done this. Get a better meat.
Well, I tried.
I do it every year, but I've done the rant on command for like 4 podcasts already. We were just late to the game on this one. Sorry, James.
Well, I still got Arif debates Arif, and that's all he really wanted tonight, so fine. As for the crimes, yeah, I think that seems fair. Although I feel like I mean, what else could involve a death penalty for a bird? I mean,
treason.
Are you spelling
Benjamin
it?
Franklin was wrong when he wanted the turkey to be the national bird.
Stop. Are you spelling treason TREESON?
What? Is there a pun I'm missing here? Or is
yes.
It just because of
there's a pun you're missing.
Is it just trees?
Yeah,
I don't get
tree some.
Oh, as in like tree fitty?
No, tree as in where they hang out.
But they just hang out in the wild. They're not like specific to trees. Bad pun. No, treason as in they are undermining the moral fabric of this nation.
Oh, God.
And in doing so, threaten our national security. Treason, kill them all.
And on that lovely note, we're going to end this episode of Norse Code. I don't think we can go any further than that.
Yeah, we've hit peak.
Yeah, we hit exactly where we should for Thanksgiving. Just a reminder that if you'd like to listen to our interview that Arif is going to conduct, that's going to be a preview of the Patriots game, you can check that out over on patreon.com/Norse Code. You can also go there for the bonus episode that will be released on Thanksgiving proper. Arif, what do you have to plug?
So I just did a piece over at Pro Football Network, which is just a recap of the week, as always. But one thing that might interest Vikings fans in particular is I make the case for Cordell Patterson being the best kickoff returner of all time, or at least within the last 50 years. For the people that want the Devin Hester argument, I don't even address it. So just head over there, see that. I talk a little bit about Jeff Saturday. I talk a little bit about Tony Pollard, which I didn't get to in my game recap, also over at Pro Football Network, and a couple of the other games that occurred this week. In fact, I think I have a take on basically every game this weekend, except the Monday night game, which I didn't do a write-up on. So head over to Pro Football Network. We'll also have some columns later this week.
Well, that's going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Again, we've got stuff over at Patreon for the rest of the week if you are interested. So, for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember that this is not sustainable. And we'll be back later this week over on Patreon. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of Pro Football Network, and he can be found at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a few different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merchandise. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
Hey, all things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.